2117, that's how many confirmed kills Sarah McKenna had as a Green Beret sniper before she traded her rifle for a tractor, becoming a single mother running a quiet family farm in Fox Hollow, Montana. When the Shadow Raiders motorcycle gang rolled into town, they saw what everyone else saw: just another struggling farmer to break another piece of land, to claim they should have counted the fence posts she repaired with military precision. Noticed how her eyes constantly scanned the horizon, even while baking pies for the county fair. Their mistake wasn't threatening her farm. Their mistake wasn't even threatening her children. Their mistake was giving a former Special Forces operative who eliminated high-value targets across 3 continents a reason to pick up her rifle again in Fox Hollow. Some battles aren't won by those with the most force, but by those who've spent 20 years learning how to hunt predators who never see the shot coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over River Creek Farm as Sarah McKenna checked the fence line along her eastern property. Her calloused hands moved with practiced efficiency, testing each post with the same precision she once used to maintain her weapons. The morning dew had barely settled on the wheat field stretching toward Eagle Mountain, but she'd already been up for hours. Mom Lily's voice carried across the field. Her 14-year-old daughter ran toward her, dark hair flying behind her. Mrs. Wilson just called, said there were bikers at the diner last night asking questions about our place. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her eyes automatically scanned the tree line. What kind of questions? About who owns it, about back taxes? Lily caught her breath. She said they weren't regular riders, had these patches looked organized. 8-year-old old Danny appeared from behind the barn, their Australian Shepherd Scout at his heels. Mom, Scout's been acting weird since sunrise, like when those coyotes were stalking the sheep. Sarah knelt to scratch behind Scout's ears, noting the dog's unusual alertness. Go help your sister with morning chores, buddy. I need to run into town. Wilson's feed and supply sat at Fox Hollow's main intersection, a weathered wooden building that had served the community for 3 generations. James Peterson looked up as Sarah entered, his worried expression confirming her suspicions. Heard you had some visitors last night, James. 4 of them. He lowered his voice. Though the store was empty, Shadow Raiders, MC. They're moving north from Idaho, taking over small towns, local businesses, farms, especially ones struggling with bank payments. Sarah maintained her casual stance, but her mind was already calculating angles, sight lines, potential threats. Anyone. When else they visited Thompson Place last week? Old man refused to sell next day. His barn burned down. Electrical problem, according to the fire marshal. The bell above the door chimed. Martha Wilson, her elderly neighbor, hurried in with unusual urgency. Sarah, thank goodness. You need to see this. They followed Martha outside. A black motorcycle cruised past its rider, making no effort to hide his surveillance. The Shadow Raiders patch on his leather cut caught the morning sun. That's the 3rd pass this morning. Martha whispered, they're watching deer like they did before the Thompson fire. Sarah squeezed Martha's hand reassuringly. Don't worry about me, just keep an eye on the kids. If they're ever in town alone, of course, dear, though I suspect you can handle yourself better than you let on. Martha's knowing look made Sarah wonder, not for the first time, how much the observant older woman has figured out back at the farm. Sarah found Lily and Danny finishing their chores. Her daughter's tense posture showed she'd spotted the motorcycle too. Mom, are we in trouble because of the bank payments? Sarah pulled both children close. No one's taking this farm. It's been in our family for 3 generations, and it'll stay that way. But those men, Danny started, some people think being scary gives them power. Sarah interrupted gently, but real strength comes from protecting what matters, not threatening others. She sent them inside, then walked the property's perimeter. Her trained eyes spotted 3 more surveillance positions where bikers had watched the farm. Their boot prints showed military-style tactical positioning. These weren't just random thugs in the barn. Sarah moved the false wall she installed behind old hay bales. The hidden compartment contained everything she'd hoped to never use again: her modified M486 sniper rifle, tactical gear, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. She'd built this cache the day she bought the farm, praying her past would never catch up with her. The sound of approaching motorcycles carried across the valley. Sarah quickly sealed the compartment and emerged from the barn. 4 bikes rumbled past her property there. Riders watching openly now, she recognized their patches from James's description. Shadow Raiders MC, the most notorious outlaw gang in 3 states. The lead rider, a tall man with a scared face, and shadow stitched on his cut, slowed to a stop. His cold smile carried clear threat. Nice place you got here, lady. Shame if something happened to it. Sarah met his gaze calmly, her stance relaxed but balanced. Private property, best move along. Just being neighborly. His grin widened. Times are hard for small farms. Banks get impatient, accidents happen. But we look after our friends, provide protection for a reasonable fee. Not interested. Shadow's expression hardened. Everyone's interested. Eventually asked Thompson how refusing worked out for him. They roared away in a cloud of dust. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. She watched them disappear around the bend, her mind already formulating plans. The Shadow Raiders thought they'd found an easy target, a struggling single mother they could intimidate and destroy. They had no idea they just threatened someone who'd spent 20 years learning how to eliminate threats exactly like them. Sarah had left that life behind for her children, built something peaceful. But if the Shadow Raiders forced her hand, they'd learn why some predators are better at hiding in plain sight than others. Inside the house, Sarah found Danny watching through the window. Are the bad men coming back? She hugged him close, remembering all the reasons she'd chosen this quietly life. Don't worry about them, sweetheart. Mom's got everything under control. But as evening fell over River Creek Farm, more motorcycles passed on the distant road. Sarah counted 6 different riders conducting surveillance, their patterns suggesting professional training. The Shadow Raiders weren't just random outlaws, they were organized, experienced, and used to getting their way. Sarah put her children to bed, then sat on the porch cleaning her shotgun, the legal one she kept for coyotes, not the sniper rifle hidden in the barn. Tomorrow she'd drive into town, talk to Sheriff Thompson, try handling this through proper channels. But as she watched more bikes pass in the growing darkness, she knew peaceful solutions were becoming less likely. The Shadow Raiders were about to learn that some threats shouldn't be judged by their appearance. Some battles aren't won by those with the most force, but by those who spent decades learning patience, precision, and the art of making predators become prey. Sheriff Robert Thompson's office smelled of coffee and gun oil, its walls lined with fading wanted posters and community service awards. The old lawman listened as Sarah detailed the Shadow Raiders' visits, his weathered face growing darker with each detail. Same pattern as Cedar Ridge in Millbrook. He said, finally, they move in slow, target vulnerable properties. By the time people realize what's happening, they own half the town. I'm not selling, Sarah stated firmly, but I'd rather handle this legally first. Thompson sighed. I'll increase patrols, but I'm short-staffed, and these guys, they're smart. Never leave enough evidence for charges. The Fox Hollow Diner breakfast crowd fell silent as 3 Shadow Raiders motorcycles pulled up outside. Sarah watched through the window as Shadow himself dismounted, followed by his lieutenants Storm and Blade. They'd chosen their moment. Well, she'd just dropped Danny at school. Well, look who it is. Shadow slid into the booth across from her. Thought about our offer. Still not interested. Sarah sipped her coffee calmly. $5,000 a month keeps your farm safe. Storm leaned against the booth. Cheap compared to rebuilding after a fire is threatening women and children. How you usually start your morning? Tom Cooper's voice carried across the diner. The local mechanic moved with the distinctive gait of someone who'd seen combat, and his prosthetic leg, a souvenir from Afghanistan. Stay out of this, Blade growled. Sarah caught the nearly imperceptible shift in Tom's weight. A fighter's preparation, she spoke before things escalated. We're done here. I have work to do. She stood, but Blade grabbed her arm. What happened next was too fast for most observers to follow. Sarah simply moved, using his own grip against him. Suddenly, Blade was sitting, nursing a wrist that was bent at an uncomfortable angle. Don't touch me again, she said quietly, then walked out. Dr. Kate Rogers arrived that afternoon to check on a pregnant mare. The veterinarian worked efficiently, but Sarah noticed her studying the fresh motorcycle tracks near the barn. Heard about the diner, Kate said casually. That move you used looked like military training, self-defense class at the community center. Kate's knowing smile suggested she wasn't convinced. Must have been some class. My brother was Force Recon. He used similar techniques. Their conversation was interrupted by scouts warning bark. Two Shadow Raiders bikes circled the property, their riders carrying suspicious objects. Get inside, Sarah instructed Kate, already moving. She reached the fence line just as one rider prepared to throw what looked like a Molotov cocktail. Sarah's warning shot with the legal shotgun struck dirt near their bikes. The riders swerved, dropping their weapons, which shatter harmlessly in the field. Next one won't miss, she called out. The bikes roared away, but she knew they'd be back. Kate emerged from the barn. Self-defense class. Teach you to shoot like that? Too lucky shot. Right? Kate packed her medical bag. You know, my brother runs a veteran support group in town. If you ever want to talk about self-defense classes. That evening, Sarah found Lily practicing with her softball bat. Behind the barn, her daughter's swings carried focused anger. Those men at the diner, Lily said, without stopping, they're not going to leave us alone. Are they? No, honey, but we're not leaving either. I'm not scared. Lily hit another ball. I saw how you handled that guy, like it was nothing. Sarah watched her daughter's determined practice. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones making threats, they're the ones protecting. What matters is that what you did before we moved here. Before Sarah could answer, scouts bark warned of approaching vehicles. Multiple motorcycles stopped at their gate. Shadow himself dismounting with Storm and Wolf flanking him. Last chance, Shadow called out. 10,000 a month now. Price goes up every time. We have to ask again. Sarah positioned herself between the bikers. And Lily, you're trespassing. Leave. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Shadow's scared face twisted. Accidents happen to kids too. Roads aren't safe these days. Sarah's voice carried deadly quiet, threatening. My children is the last mistake you'll ever make. Something in her tone made Wolf step back. Even Shadow's confidence wavered briefly. Think it over, he said finally. Tomorrow's deadline. After that, we stop being nice. As the bikes roared away, Sarah heard Tom Cooper's truck approaching. The veteran mechanic pulled up, his expression grim. Saw them heading this way. Thought you might want some company. Thanks, Tom, but I can handle them. No doubt about that. He studied her stance. You know, the way you move, the way you handle yourself, reminds me of some operators I served with. Special forces types. Sarah met his knowing look. Just a farmer protecting her land, right? Tom nodded slowly. Well, this farmer might want to know that Shadow's crew is moving in heavy tonight. 30 bikes at least coming up from their compound. Word is they're done negotiating. Scouts bark caught their attention. More motorcycles passed on the distant road, their riders conducting surveillance with military precision. The Shadow Raiders were done playing games. Sarah watched them disappear into the gathering dusk. She tried handling this legally, tried protecting her cover, but as she counted the increasing number of bikes circling her property like vultures, she knew tomorrow would bring hard choices. Some battles can't be won through peaceful means. Sometimes protecting what you love means becoming what you left behind. The Shadow Raiders thought numbers and intimidation guaranteed victory. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah woke to Scout's low growl an hour before dawn. The dog's ears were focused on the eastern approach, where the first hint of morning painted the sky in dark blues. She'd been expecting this. The Shadow Raiders always attacked at first light. Lily, she called softly, finding her daughter already dressed. Take Danny to Martha's. Use the creek path like we practiced. I can help fight. You help by keeping your brother safe. Sarah check the legal shotgun. Remember what I taught you about watching the tree line. Stay low, use cover, count 5 seconds between movements. Lily recited. Mom, be careful. Danny appeared, backpack ready, Scout at his side. The boy's eyes were scared, but determined. The bad men are coming, aren't they? Sarah hugged them both. Everything's going to be fine. Martha's expecting you. Scout guard the dog led her children toward the hidden creek path. As the first rumble of motorcycles carried across the valley, Sarah counted engines by sound, at least 20 approaching from the main road. Another group from the north, more than expected. Quite the army they brought. Tom Cooper's voice came from behind the barn. The veteran mechanic emerged with his own shotgun. Thought you could use backup. You shouldn't be here, Tom. Neither should they. He checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. Besides, some fights matter more than others. The first wave of Shadow Raiders roared through her front gate, led by Storm and Wolf. Sarah noted their tactical approach, standard military flanking pattern. These weren't just thugs on bikes. Last chance. Lady Storm's voice carried across the pre-dawn darkness sign over the farm. Or we burn it all. Sarah's response was a warning shot that kicked up dirt near their front tires. The bikes scattered, their riders taking covered positions with practiced coordination. Their ex-military Tom observed moving in fire teams. I noticed Sarah was already moving to higher ground, remembering countless similar operations from her past life. Watch the barn's blind spot. More bikes arrived surrounding the farmhouse. Shadow himself appeared directing his men with hand signals Sarah recognized from combat training. Burn it. He ordered. Burn it all. Molotov cocktails arced through the early light. Sarah's shots struck two in midair, while Tom's blast caught another, but one got through, setting the edge of the wheat field ablaze. Fire team moving on your three, Tom called out. Sarah pivoted, catching three raiders trying to flank her position. Her shotgun's pump action dropped two, while the third scrambled for cover. Every shot was carefully placed, disabling without killing. You've done this before, Tom commented between reloads. So have they. Sarah spotted more tactical movements in her peripheral vision. They're pushing us toward the house. Blade led the next assault team, their approach showing clear military training, but Sarah had spent years teaching soldiers like them. She used their own tactics against them, drawing them into prepared fields of fire. Ladies got skills. Will shouted to Shadow. This ain't no normal farmer. Shut up and push forward, Shadow commanded. We've got numbers, but numbers meant nothing against experience. Sarah's counterattacks forced them to waste ammunition, to bunch up in predictable patterns. Tom provided perfect covering fire, his own combat experience evident. The sound of sirens, carried from town. Sheriff Thompson's deputies were finally responding, but Sarah knew they'd never arrive in time. Time running low. Tom reported his shotgun running dry. Martha's root cellar. Sarah directed, go through the creek path and leave you here. Not happening. A new sound cut through the gunfire. Martha Wilson's ancient truck roaring up the back road, the old woman handling it like a rally driver. She skidded to a stop behind the barn. Need a ride? Martha called out cheerfully. Brought something that might help too. She pulled out Sarah's gun case, the hidden one from the barn. Sarah's eyes widened. Found it while cleaning last spring, Martha explained. Figured you had your reasons. Thought today might be the day. Sarah retrieved her sniper rifle, the familiar weight settling into her hands. Time to stop playing defense, Tom. Get Martha clear. She checked her scope with practiced precision. Things are about to get complicated. Who are you? Tom asked, real awe in his voice. Just a farmer protecting her lands. Sarah moved to higher ground, decades of training taking over through her scope. She picked out Shadow's position, coordinating his men with military hand signals. Time to change the game. Her first shot disabled Shadow's bike, the precise round striking the engine block. The second shot took Storm's radio, cutting their communications. Each pull of the trigger demonstrated years of expert training. Special Forces. Wolf's panicked voice carried across the farm. She's Special Forces. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Cold and professional. You have 30 seconds to clear my property. Anyone still here after that becomes a target. Your choice. The Shadow Raiders broke formation, scrambling for their bikes. Even Shadow recognized the shift in power, mounting his disabled motorcycle and pushing it manually. This isn't over, he shouted, but fear had replaced his usual confidence. Actually, Sarah settled her scope on his position. It is her final shot struck the ground at his feet with sniper precision, a clear message about what she could have hit instead. As the raiders retreated in chaos, Martha and Tom returned. The old woman looked completely unruffled by the morning's excitement. Well, Martha smiled. That was more interesting than bingo. Kay and Tom studied the precision shots. Sarah had placed the tactical positioning. She'd used Green Beret, that's classified. But Sarah's slight smile confirmed his guess. Mom, Lily, and Danny emerged from the creek path, Scout bounding ahead to check on her. Sarah hugged her children close, breathing in their safety. But she knew this wasn't over. The Shadow Raiders would be back with greater numbers and better preparation. You should have told me, Tom said quietly, about your background. I could have helped sooner. Wasn't your fight. It is now. He gestured toward town, where more trucks were arriving, locals coming to help, drawn by the sound of battle. Something tells me we're all in this together. Sarah watched the smoke clear from her wheat field, calculating what would come next. The Shadow Raiders had just learned she was more than a simple farmer, but they hadn't seen anything yet. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones hiding in plain sight, and Sarah McKenna had spent 20 years becoming very, very good at. Remaining invisible until the perfect moment to strike, the Fox Hollow diner buzzed with barely contained excitement as Sarah assessed the damage reports. 3 local farms hit in the last hour. All families who'd come to help defend her property, the Shadow Raiders, were sending a message: stand together, fall together. Thompson Place got it worst. James Peterson reported grimly, barns gone, equipment destroyed, but Bill's still standing with us. They're changing tactics. Tom Cooper observed his military experience, showing these weren't intimidation hits, this was strategic targeting. Sarah studied the map spread across their table, marking attack patterns. The Raiders weren't just being vengeful, they were isolating key properties, cutting supply lines between allied farms. Mom Lily approached with Danny scouts acting weird again, but different this time. Sarah checked her watch. They're watching us, planning their next move. Dr. Kate Rogers slipped into the booth, laying down a thick folder. You need to see this: hospital records from 3 counties. Shadow Raiders aren't just taking farms, they're building something bigger. The documents revealed a pattern: property seized through intimidation became distribution points. Local businesses turned into money laundering operations. The Raiders weren't just a gang, they were an organized criminal enterprise with military precision. Shadow was special forces too, Kate added quietly. Different branch, different war, but he knows what he's doing. Martha Wilson arrived with fresh coffee, her calm demeanor unchanged by the morning's violence. Sarah, dear, perhaps it's time to tell them everything about what you did before farming. The diner fell silent. Sarah met each person's eyes, measuring trust against necessity. Green Berets, she said finally, 20 years, most of it classified. I was a sniper, one of their best. We know. Sheriff Thompson's voice carried from the door. Known since you bought the farm. Your background check was interesting. Why didn't you say anything? Same reason you didn't. Some skills are best kept hidden until needed. He laid his badge on the table. County commissioners ordered me to shut this down. Says we're provoking the Raiders. They're bought. Tom concluded. Whole state's compromised. But I'm not retiring. Quietly, Thompson smiled grimly. Time to choose sides. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She recognized the tactical coordinates. Shadow was calling a meet. He wants to talk, she announced. Neutral ground, just him and me. It's a trap, Tom warned. Of course it is. Sarah stood. That's why I need you all to understand what comes next. She detailed her plan, drawing on decades of special operations experience. Each listener had a role: veterans like Tom providing tactical support, Martha coordinating civilian resources, Kate monitoring medical needs. They think hitting our farms makes us vulnerable, Sarah concluded. Time to show them how wrong they are. The meeting point was Eagle Peak Overlook, providing clear views of the valley below. Sarah arrived early, identifying sniper positions where Shadow's men were waited. Impressive setup. Shadow emerged from the shadows. 3 kill teams overlapping fields of fire. Almost perfect. 4th team on the ridge gives it away, Sarah replied calmly. Sloppy positioning. Shadow's scarred face showed genuine respect. Green Berets should have recognized the training. We're not so different, you and I protect people, you prey on them. Big difference. I offer order, structure. These towns are dying anyway. We give them purpose by destroying families, burning homes, by reminding them that strength is all that matters. Shadow moved with deadly grace. Join us, your skills, your experience. We could own the whole state. Not interested? Then watch it burn. Every farm that helped you, every business that supported you, all of it gone. His smile turned cruel. How many children live in Fox Hollow? Accidents happen in small towns. Sarah's voice carried deadly quiet, threatening. Children is a line you don't want to cross. Too late, already gave the order. By sunset, Fox Hollow learns what defiance costs. Sarah was moving before he finished speaking. Her first strike caught him off guard. Special forces against special forces. Decades of training unleashed. Shadow recovered quickly, his own combat experience showing they fought with lethal precision, each recognizing the other's professional skill. Your snipers can't get an angle, Sarah said between strikes. Ridge teams positioned wrong. Amateur mistake. Shadow's confidence wavered. How did? Because I chose those positions. Sarah's counterattack drove him back. Your men have been in my crosshairs for 10 minutes. They just don't know it yet. On key, Tom's veterans emerged from hidden positions surrounding Shadow's teams with practiced efficiency. Martha's truck appeared. More townspeople arriving armed and ready. See, that's the difference between us, Sarah explained. You think strength comes from fear. I know it comes from Community Shadows Radio, crackled his plan. Attacks on Fox Hollow had met unexpected resistance. Kate's medical network had spread the warning. Thompson's deputies chose loyalty over corruption. This isn't over Shadow spat blood, actually. It is, you just don't know it yet. Sarah's stance shifted subtly now. We do this my way because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces without learning the most important lesson. Sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the one you carry, it's the community standing behind you ready to fight. As one sunset painted Fox Hollow's main street in blood-red hues as Sarah counted approaching motorcycles, by sound the Shadow Raiders weren't just launching an attack. This was a full-scale invasion, 36 bikes at least, with more coming. They're splitting into teams, Tom reported through their makeshift radio network. Military formation. Just like you predicted, Shadows using standard special forces protocols. Sarah responded, recognizing the pattern. He's not trying to hide his training anymore. From her position at the school, Lily's voice crackled over the radio. Mom got the younger kids in the basement. Danny spotted 2 raiders trying to check the back entrance. Good work. Honey, remember what I taught you about multiple exit routes. Keep them quiet, watch the sight lines. Lily's voice carried her mother's calm authority. I've got this, Mom. Kate Rogers arrived at Sarah's position, medical bag ready. Hospital records weren't the whole story. Shadow Marcus Rivers. He was more than special forces, black ops, wet work specialist. This is personal for him. How personal? Remember the classified operation in Kandahar, the one that officially never happened? Kate's expression was grim. He was there on the other side. The revelation hit Sarah hard. Kandahar, the mission that earned her the highest kill count in Green Beret history. She'd eliminated an entire enemy special operations team except for their leader, who was never found. Mom, Danny's urgent whisper came through the radio. They're not just attacking, they're looking for something. The men at the school, they're checking specific rooms. Sarah's tactical mind processed this new information. They think we have evidence, documents. We do. Martha Wilson appeared like a ghost, carrying a thick folder, been collecting paper trails since they first arrived. Bank records, property transfers, political payoffs. Everything. You've been investigating them. Martha's smile carried decades of hidden experience. Dear, I wasn't just a secretary during Vietnam intelligence operations. Never really leave you. The first explosion rocked Wilson's feed store. Shadow Raiders charged through the smoke, expecting to find panicked civilians. Instead, they met organized resistance. Tom's veterans had prepared defensive positions, turning the Raiders' own tactical approach against them. East Team pinned down. Storm's voice carried across town. These people know our plays because I taught them. Sarah's voice cut through their radio frequency. Remember Kandahar? Shadow, the team you lost. Silence fell across all channels. Then Shadow's cold laugh. McKenna should have known you always were the best at hunting your own kind. Last chance. Leave Fox Hollow, never return. Can't do that. This isn't just about territory anymore. These towns, these people, they're part of something bigger, something you can't stop. Sarah spotted his position through her scope, commanding his forces from the water tower. Perfect tactical elevation, exactly where she'd have chosen. You're right about one thing, she replied. This is bigger than territory. These people aren't just defending property, they're defending home. Across town, her preparations probed their worth. Raiders charging the school met Lily's carefully organized evacuation routes, empty hallways, and false trails leading to prepared ambush points. Their attempts to flank through back streets encountered Danny's early warning system of lookouts and signals. They're adapting, Tom warned, switching to secondary protocols. Let them. Sarah was already moving, years of combat experience flowing through her movements. Kate, medical team ready. Trauma center set up in the church basement. Martha's coordinating civilian support. Shadow's voice crackled through again. You've trained them well, McKenna, making fighters out of farmers, but you've brought them into a war they can't win. That's where you're wrong. Sarah's counterattack began. Coordinated movements, taking down Shadow's teams with surgical precision. I didn't make them fighters, I showed them they already were. The Raiders' military precision began to crack. Their tactical advantages meant nothing against an entire town using their own strategies against them. Every alley became a potential ambush, every building a defensive position. Fallback. Storm ordered pattern. Omega-3. Sarah's laugh carried real amusement. Amateur Tom spring the trap. The Raiders' escape routes suddenly became kill zones. Years of special operations experience Translated into small-town defense, Sarah's training multiplied through every citizen who stood their ground. Mom Lily's voice carried triumph. They're running, but Sarah knew better. Shadow was too experienced for a simple retreat. This was repositioning, preparation for something bigger. Danny, what do you see? Her son's observation skills proved invaluable again. They're not all leaving, some are hiding equipment, big cases, like the ones in our barn. Sarah's blood ran cold. Weapon cases, military grade. Shadow wasn't retreating, he was preparing for a siege. You've got 1 hour, McKenna. Shadow's voice confirmed her fears. Surrender the evidence, clear the town, or I show everyone what a real special operations team can do. The sun finally set over Fox Hollow, but the real darkness was yet to come. Sarah gathered her impromptu command team: Tom, Kate, Martha, and Sheriff Thompson. The time for simple defense was over. Shadows right about one thing, she told them: this is war. But he forgot the most important lesson from our kind of operations. What's that? Tom asked. The deadliest predators aren't the ones making threats. Sarah checked her weapon with practiced deficiency. They're the ones who've already chosen their killing ground. Because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces just learning how to fight, she'd learned how to turn entire environments into weapons. Shadow thought he was preparing for a siege. He didn't realize he was walking into a trap. 2 decades in the making. Night fell over Fox Hollow as Sarah transformed the town into a fortress. Every farmer's intimate knowledge of their land became a tactical advantage. Every local's understanding of back roads and hidden paths turned into strategic value. They got military-grade equipment staged here, and here. Tom indicated positions on their makeshift command map. Shadow's not planning a gang attack. This is a full tactical assault. That's exactly what he wants us to think. Sarah studied the map with decades of combat experience. He's using standard special forces deception protocols. The real threat will come from an unexpected direction. Kate Rogers burst into their command center at the diner, clutching newly discovered documents. Found something in the hospital records. Shadow's team, they're not just here for territory. They're building infrastructure for something bigger. What kind of infrastructure? Military supply routes, hidden caches, training facilities disguised as abandoned properties. Kate spread out the evidence. They've been setting up a shadow network across 3 states. Martha Wilson nodded knowingly. Just like Nicaragua in 3, create a parallel support structure using civilian cover. Everyone stared at the elderly woman, who simply smiled. Oh, you'd be amazed what a secretary learned during the Cold War. Dear Sarah's radio crackled. Mom Lily's voice was steady despite the tension. Danny spotted something weird. The raiders aren't just placing weapons, they're setting up relay stations, communications gear. Smart girl, Tom commented. They're building a command and control network. No, Sarah's tactical mind saw the bigger picture. They're revealing their existing one. Danny, what else do you see? Her son's observation skills proved invaluable again. The equipment's not new, Mom, it's dusty, used like it's been here. While he's right, Martha confirmed. I've been tracking unusual signal patterns for months. We're not just facing an invasion, we're exposing an operation that's been here all along. Shadow's voice cut through their radios, precise and cold. Finally figuring it out, McKenna. Kandahar wasn't just a mission, it was a rehearsal for what? For proving that people like us, special operations, wet work specialists, were the only ones strong enough to maintain order. These towns, these civilian sheep, they need warriors to guide them. Sarah watched more raiders taking positions around town. Their movements showed extensive military training, but also something else: absolute conviction in their cause. You're wrong about one thing, she responded. These aren't sheep, and I'm about to prove it. On her signal, Fox Hollow revealed its own transformation. Farmers who'd spent decades learning every inch of their land became expert guerrilla fighters. Local hunters demonstrated their own deadly skills. Even the high school shot class contributed their knowledge of machinery, turned to tactical advantage. First wave incoming. Tom's warning carried across their network. Shadow's forces launched their initial assault with military precision, expecting to find amateur resistance. Instead, they found a town turned weapons. Sarah had spent months preparing for this, teaching civilians to become defenders. Every street became a potential ambush, every familiar building a strategic strong point. They're not fighting like civilians. Storm's frustrated voice carried over. Intercepted communications, these are professional tactics, because they're not just fighting for property, Sarah replied coldly. They're fighting for home, something you forgot how to understand. The first wave of raiders fell back in disarray, their military precision useless against intimate local knowledge. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Kandahar taught me something important. Shadow's voice carried real emotion. Now that women like you playing soldier would always choose the soft approach, always try to minimize casualties, you learned the wrong lesson. Sarah's response was accompanied by precision shots that disabled key raider positions. I don't minimize casualties. Because I'm soft, I do it. Because I know exactly how many ways I can hurt you without killing. Danny's voice came through, urgent but controlled. Mom, they're moving something big into position. Long cases, like the ones in those old war movies. Sarah's blood ran cold. Anti-material rifles. Heavy weapons, that's right. Shadow confirmed. No more playing nice. You've got 1 hour to surrender the town, or I demonstrate what real special operations violence looks like. But Sarah had planned for this too. Her months of preparation hadn't just been about defense. She'd been setting up her own operation, turning Fox Hollow into exactly the kind of trap that would snare overconfident professional soldiers. Tom, get the veterans in position. Martha, activate your intelligence network. Kate, medical teams on standby. Sarah checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. Lily, Danny, you know what to do, just like you taught us. Lily confirmed. Sometimes the best defense is making them think they're the predators. Danny finished when they're really the prey, because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces just learning to fight. She'd learned how to turn overconfidence into vulnerability, how to make professional training become a weakness. Shadow thought his military experience guaranteed victory. He was about to learn why the most dangerous predators are the ones who know how to play prey until exactly the right moment to strike. The first heavy rounds tore through Fox Hollow's morning silence. With devastating precision, Shadow's anti-material rifles targeted key positions, demonstrating his team's professional training. But Sarah had anticipated this, had prepared her people for exactly this kind of assault. Western team, hold position, she commanded through their network. Let them think those shots are effective. East side taking heavy fire. Tom reported his veterans maintaining discipline under the barrage. They're using military-grade targeting systems. Good. Sarah's voice carried cold satisfaction. It means they're relying on technology instead of instinct. Danny, what do you see? Her son's voice came through clear and focused. They're watching their scopes, not their surroundings. Just like you said they would. Raiders advancing on the school, Lily reported. But something's wrong. Their formation's too obvious. Sarah smiled slightly. Shadow was good, but he'd forgotten the first rule of special operations. Sometimes the obvious approach is too obvious. Mom, Danny's urgent whisper cut through. There's someone in the old mill, been there since before the shooting started. Martha's voice confirmed. My sources saw vehicles moving there last night. Heavy equipment. The mill's not a tactical position, Tom argued. No clear lines of fire. Unless this isn't about firing lines. Dr. Kate Rogers broke in. Sarah found something in the old town records. That mill it used to be a military storage facility during the Cold War. Underground bunkers, tunnel systems. Sarah's tactical mind connected the pieces. Shadow is not just attacking the town, he's after something specific, something hidden here. Very good, McKenna. Shadow's voice carried real respect. Still the best at seeing the bigger picture. Did you really think I chose this town randomly? The heavy weapons fire intensified, but Sarah noted its pattern, not random destruction. Carefully coordinated suppression fire, keeping townspeople away from specific areas. The mill's the real target, she confirmed. Everything else is distraction, just like Kandahar. Shadow's laugh carried old bitterness. You saw through my versions there too. Cost me my entire team. That was different. That was war. This is war, a different kind, fought in shadows. Most people never see these towns, these innocent civilians. They're sitting on a network we built decades ago. Hidden supplies, secret routes, emergency catches, perfect infrastructure for operators like us. Sarah watched raiders moving through town with military precision, not just attacking, searching, securing, following a carefully planned protocol. He's right, Martha confirmed. During the Cold War, we built fallback positions across the country, supply lines, communication networks. Most were never activated. And now you want them for your private army. Sarah concluded for bringing order to a weak society. Shadow's voice hardened these people playing at normal life. They sleep safely because of warriors like us. Time they remembered that a massive explosion rocked the north side of town. Sarah recognized the signature shake charges. Professional demolition underground access point exposed. Tom reported they're heading below ground. Mom Lily's voice carried unexpected insight. Remember what you taught me about hunting, how sometimes you let them think they're reaching their target, because that's when they're most vulnerable. Danny finished, too focused on the prize to see the trap. Sarah smiled with fierce pride. Her children had learned well. All units execute pattern Delta, she commanded, just like we practiced. Fox Hollow's defenders moved with coordinated precision, not the rigid military efficiency Shadow expected, but something more fluid, more adaptable. Local knowledge combined with Sarah's training created a hybrid style that professional soldiers couldn't predict. They're in the tunnels, Tom confirmed, moving fast. Standard tactical spread perfect. Sarah checked her weapon, decades of special operations experience flowing through her movements. Underground, all their training works against them. No room to maneuver, no way to spot ambush positions. You've been planning this from the start. Shadow realized everything above ground. It's all been pushing us exactly where you wanted us. You forgot the most important lesson from our kind of operations. Sarah replied coldly, sometimes the deadliest trap isn't the one you can see. Because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces just learning tactics. She'd learned how to think like her enemies, how to turn their strengths into weaknesses. Shadow thought he was achieving his objective. He was actually walking into a killing ground. 2 decades in the making. All units prepare for underground warfare. Sarah commanded, remember your training, remember what we're fighting for. Family. Lily responded, community. Tom added, home. Danny concluded, Shadow's forces had the training, the equipment, the professional skill, but they were about to learn that some battles aren't won by the most technically proficient fighters. They're won by those who know exactly what they're protecting and exactly how far they'll go to protect it. Darkness enveloped the Cold War tunnels beneath Fox Hollow as Sarah moved with practiced silence. The underground complex was exactly what she'd anticipated, a maze of reinforced corridors designed for military operations, perfect for defenders who knew its layout, deadly for overconfident attackers. They've split into 3 teams. Tom's whispered report came through their secure channels, moving in standard search patterns. Let them hunt, Sarah replied softly. Down here, their night vision works against them. Too focused on what's directly ahead. Mom. Danny's voice carried urgency from his observation post above. They're carrying something weird, like big metal briefcases. Martha's response was immediate. Nuclear credentials, Cold War authentication codes. Every facility like this had them accessing old records. Now, Dr. Kate added, Shadow. Marcus Rivers, his father, was the original site commander. That's his connection to Fox Hollow. Sarah processed this revelation. While tracking raider movements through the tunnels, he's not just after the infrastructure, he's after command protocols. Exactly. Shadow's voice cut through their communications. Did you think I chose this town by accident, McKenna? My father built this network, created a system for real warriors to maintain control. Your father was relieved of command. Martha countered, discharge for unstable behavior and extremist views. He was a visionary. Shadow's composure cracked slightly. He understood that civilians need to be controlled, not coddled. These access codes, these hidden facilities, they're our heritage, our right. Sarah signaled Tom's veterans into flanking positions. The raiders were good, moving with professional precision through the darkness, but their military training made them predictable. You really think people need warriors to control them? Sarah's voice echoed deliberately, drawing attention. Look what they did when you attacked farmers, became fighter shopkeepers, became tacticians playing soldier. Shadow sneered, they'll break when they see real combat like your team. Broken Kahar. The taunt hit home. Raiders shifted positions, discipline wavering at the reminder of Shadow's greatest failure. Mom. Lily reported from above, they're moving something big into the main entrance. Looks like breaching charges. Good. Sarah smiled slightly. They're getting desperate. Underground, the battle transformed into a deadly game of cat and mouse. But Sarah had spent months preparing these tunnels, turning them into a trap for exactly this kind of military operation. Contact front. Storm's voice carried panic. They're not where they're supposed to be because we're not fighting by your rulebook, Sarah replied coldly, her first shots disabled. Key raiders with surgical precision, non-lethal, but devastating to morale. Backup power failing, Danny reported. Just like you planned, Mom. The raiders' night vision equipment suddenly became a liability. The rapid light change disorienting trained operators. Sarah's defenders, prepared for this moment, struck with devastating efficiency. This is impossible, Shadow's voice carried real fear. Now these are civilian volunteers against special operations forces. No, Sarah countered, eliminating another team with textbook accuracy. These are people defending their home against men who forgot the difference between strength and cruelty. Dr. Kate's voice cut through with urgency. Sarah found more records. Shadow's father, he didn't just get discharged. He tried to activate these facilities during peacetime, planned to use them for some kind of military coup. Like father, like son, Martha commented, using the same infrastructure for the same purpose. Underground, the raiders' professional formation began to crack. Their military precision meant nothing against defenders who'd memorized every corner, every shadow, every quirk of the tunnel system. Fall back to pattern, Echo, Shadow commanded, but his operators were already scattered, their training useless in this environment. They're retreating toward the main chamber, Tom reported with grim satisfaction. Right where we want them. Sarah moved with lethal grace through the darkness, decades of special operations experience flowing through every movement. Shadow had trained his men well, but he'd made one critical mistake. You forgot the most important lesson from our kind of operations, she broadcast coldly. Sometimes the deadliest predator isn't the one with the most tactical training, it's the one fighting for something that matters. Lily added from above, the one who knows exactly what they're protecting. Danny concluded, because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces just learning combat tactics. She'd learned that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from giving them the tools to defend themselves. Thunder rippled through Fox Hollow's underground tunnels as Shadow, those forces made their final push. The main chamber, once a Cold War command center, had become their last stronghold. But Sarah had been counting on exactly this. They're cornered, Tom reported, his veterans maintaining a careful perimeter. But cornered operators are the most dangerous kind, especially these ones, Sarah replied, noting their movements through her thermal scope. They're not just retreating, they're getting something ready, Mom. Danny's voice carried controlled urgency. They brought something up from the lower levels. Big metal containers, old military markings. Martha's sharp intake of breath was audible. Chemical weapons. The facility stored them during a crisis. They were supposed to be decommissioned, but my father knew better. Shadow's voice carried triumph. Now knew someday real warriors would need them. 30 years in storage, still perfectly viable. Dr. Kate's analysis came through rapidly. VX Nerve Agent, military grade 1 container, could take out half the county. Sarah watched raiders moving with practiced efficiency, preparing the weapons for deployment. Shadow had trained them well, too well. Do you think threatening civilians makes you strong? Sarah kept them talking, buying time. That's not being a warrior, that's being a coward. I'm being practical. Shadow's laugh carried old bitterness. My father understood. Kandahar proved it. Civilians need to be controlled, not coddled. Fear is the only language they truly understand. You're wrong about one thing. Sarah's voice turned cold. These aren't just civilians anymore. On her signal, Fox Hollow's defenders revealed their final positions. Months of preparation, weeks of training, all leading to this moment. Every tunnel access, every ventilation shaft, every possible escape route covered by people who'd learned to be warriors in their own way. Impossible. Storm's voice shook. These are just farmer shopkeepers. No, Sarah corrected, these are people defending their home, and you just threaten their children. Shadow's composure cracked slightly. You think having numbers matters? My men are trained operators. We have chemical weapons, one cascade lease. And look at your men's positions. Sarah interrupted coldly. Really? Look. Danny's observation proved crucial again. Mom, 3 of them just checked their boots, just like you said they would. Sarah smiled grimly. Because real operators know when you're pinned down. First, check your exit route. They just realized they're standing in 6 in of water. The raiders' professional calm wavered as they understood their situation. The flooding wasn't from battle damage. It was deliberate. 1 spark, Sarah continued, 1 electrical charge in that water, your entire team goes down before they could release anything non-lethal. but very, very effective. Your bluffing Shadow snarled, "You'd never risk chemical weapons discharge. Check your air sensors. Dirk cut in the ventilation systems. Been modified. Any release gets contained and neutralized. We've had months to prepare for this." Lily's voice carried fierce pride. "While you were playing soldier, we were actually protecting people." Sarah watched Shadow's team realize their position. The best special operations training in the world meant nothing when you were outmaneuvered by an entire community working together. "Last chance," Sarah offered. "Surrender the weapons. End this. Without casualties." "Never." Shadow's voice hardened. "You've forgotten what we are, McKenna. We're not peacekeepers. We're warriors, killers." "No," Sarah countered. "We were protectors. You forgot that. And that's why you'll lose." The next moments dissolved into chaos. Shadow's team moved with desperate precision. But Sarah had prepared for this too. The water, the angles, the confined space. Everything worked against professional military training. Mom Danny reported calmly. "They're dropping their weapons, all except Shadow." Because Shadow had made one final crucial mistake. He trained his men to be perfect soldiers, but he'd forgotten to give them something worth dying for. "It's over," Sarah announced, her voice carrying through the tunnels. "Your men understand, even if you don't. Real strength isn't about controlling people through fear. It's about teaching them to protect themselves," Lily added, "and giving them something worth protecting." Danny concluded. Shadow stood alone now, his perfect military operation in ruins, but Sarah recognized the look in his eyes. A cornered operator with nothing left to lose. "You think this ends here?" He raised a detonator. "I've got enough charges placed to bring down the whole tunnel system. Bury everything, including the chemical weapons." "How many people up there know you helped create this nightmare? How many know what we really did in Kahar?" Because Sarah McKenna hadn't spent 20 years in special forces just learning combat tactics. She'd learned that sometimes the hardest battles aren't won through superior firepower or better training. They're won by remembering exactly what you're fighting for. Sarah faced Shadow across the flooded command center. Two special forces operators who'd taken very different paths. From the same starting point between them lay enough chemical weapons to devastate 3 counties, and Shadow's thumb rested steady on the detonator. "You want to know what really happened in Kahar?" Shadow's voice carried years of bitterness. "Why I hate you so much. I know why." Sarah kept her rifle trained steady. "Your team was running unauthorized weapon sales, using special operations covered to arm warlords. We were being practical, creating ability through controlled chaos, just like my father tried to do here." Kate's voice cut through their cowls. "Sarah found the final records. Shadow's father, he didn't just get discharged. He was building a private army using these facilities to train military extremists like father." Like stunned Martha added grimly, both thinking they could control chaos. Shadow's laugh carried genuine pain. "You don't understand. My father was creating order, a system where real warriors could maintain control. Then they drove him mad, destroyed everything he built. He destroyed himself." Sarah countered. "Just like you're doing now." Mom Danny's voice came through quietly, his hands shaking. "Just like you said happens when someone's about to break." Sarah watched Shadow's deteriorating composure. Years of special operations experience let her read the signs. A tactical expert reaching his psychological limits. "Your father wasn't trying to create order," she said carefully. "He was trying to build his own private kingdom, just like you're doing with the Raiders. We're elite operators." Shadow's control cracked further. "We're the only ones strong enough to do what's necessary in Kahar. You didn't just kill my team, you destroyed everything you were building a criminal empire." Sarah replied coldly, "Using military skills to terrorize civilians, just like you're doing here." Through her tactical scope, Sarah spotted Tom's veterans taking final positions. One wrong move, and the chemical weapons would become a reality. But if they didn't move, Shadow's desperation would eventually force the same outcome. Mom Lily's voice carried unexpected calm. "Remember what you taught me about people who are truly lost. Sometimes the kindest thing is letting them fall." Danny finished. Because Sarah had taught her children more than just survival skills. She taught them about the true cost of violence and the courage sometimes needed to choose a different path. "Your father wasn't a visionary." Marcus Sarah used Shadow's real name deliberately. "He was a broken man who couldn't separate strength from cruelty, just like you're doing now." "Shut up." Shadow's composure finally shattered. "You think these people are worth protecting? Their sheep. They need warriors to guide them. Look around you." Sarah gestured to the defender holding position. These sheep outmaneuvered your entire tactical team. These civilians you despise, they chose to become warriors to protect their home. They're nothing playing it being soldiers. No, Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. There's something you and your father never understood. Their community, family, people who protect each other, not because they're ordered to, but because they choose to. Shadow's thumb tightened on the detonator. Then they can die together. But Sarah had been counting on this moment of broken control. Her shot took Shadow's hand with surgical precision. Even as Tom's veterans moved with practiced coordination, the detonator fell, caught in specialized containment nets. They'd prepared clear confirmed chemical weapons. Secured. Shadow stared at his bleeding hand. 20 years of hatred and delusion finally cracking. You could have killed me in Kahar here. Why didn't you? Because that's the difference between us. Sarah lowered her rifle slowly. I didn't forget what all that training was really for: protecting people, not controlling them. Mom's right. Lily's voice carried through their cowls. Real strength isn't about making people fear you, it's about teaching them not to fear at all, Danny added quietly. Sarah watched the fight finally leave Shadow's eyes. 20 years of pursuing his father's twisted vision, of trying to turn military excellence into civilian control, all ending in a flooded bunker beneath